I never imagined silence could feel like betrayal. But that's exactly what it was. The moment my brother slid into my seat in that courtroom, dressed in my suit, wearing my name like it belonged to him, not a twitch of hesitation, not a glance toward me, just silence, heavy, practiced, complete. That morning the air tasted like bleach and nerves. We'd barely spoken on the ride in. I watched his fingers tighten on the steering wheel, knuckles blanching against the leather. But his face stayed calm, eerily calm. I should have said something then. Maybe it would have changed what followed. But I didn't. I let the moment pass. The plan was my idea. I'll own that. I was the one who couldn't stand the way they looked at me. The prosecutors, the gallery, the damn jury. They saw a headline, not a man. James Carter, twin brother, prime suspect. I knew it wasn't just about the evidence. It was about my face. The same face that had smiled beside her in photos. The same face they'd seen, sobbing on the news. Familiarity becomes guilt in a courtroom, and I was drowning in it. The idea started as a joke. "You know, you could sit in for me," I'd said one night, weeks before the trial. Nobody would know. Elliot didn't laugh. He just stared, unreadable. Then he said, "Maybe." That should have been the end of it. But then came the pre-trial motions, the lies piling up like kindling, and me, too exhausted to keep pretending I was innocent to people who didn't care. So the night before the opening statements, I asked again, "Seriously, Elle, just the first day. Let them see you. Calm, collected, clean-shaven, you. Then I'll step in after." Elliot looked at me across the twin beds in our old room. Childhood ghosts still in the wallpaper. His expression didn't change. "What happens when they realize it wasn't you?" I said. "They won't. Just walk in. Sit down. Say nothing." That first morning, no one noticed. I sat in the hallway, cap pulled low, a discarded laptop bag in my lap like any other anonymous observer. He walked through the security checkpoint with my ID and my trial folder. They nodded. They waved him through. When the judge entered, everyone rose. And then they sat. And the lie began. I remember watching from the hallway camera feed, hidden, in a dusty tech room near the clerk's office. The grainy monitor flickered, but there he was, my brother sitting stone-faced beside my attorney, nodding as if he knew the strategy, the files, the stakes. My stomach twisted. He didn't flinch. It was like watching myself from the outside, but colder, detached. My lawyer didn't know. That part still haunts me. I told her I'd be late and that my brother would drop off some updated statements. She didn't question it, just nodded, distracted by documents and opening nerves. She didn't even look closely at him. Not then. The prosecutor started strong. She was sharp, clean-voiced, well-rehearsed. I'd heard her speak before, but now her voice sounded like a blade against my skin. "James Carter was the last person to see Emily Winslow alive," she said, clicking her remote. The screen behind her showed a grainy security still of me, us, arguing outside the bookstore 3 days before Emily vanished. The defendant claims they argued about money, but witnesses say the fight turned physical. I gripped the chair. Arm in the tech room, my brother didn't flinch, not once. They were close, intimate. "And that's why this case matters," she said, scanning the room. "Because proximity is not innocence, it's motive." I hated her then, not because she was wrong, but because she was right in all the ways that didn't matter. Elliot looked forward, hands clasped, his expression unreadable. Perfectly still. The jury scribbled notes. The judge looked bored, and I sat behind the scenes, breathing someone else's fate. The irony was, Emily wasn't just my ex. She was Elliot's friend too. They'd met through me but bonded over books and late-night sarcasm. She trusted him, laughed with him. He'd once told me, quietly, if things were different, maybe she would have ended up with me. I never forgot that. The lie became easier the second day. I watched as Elliot entered again. Same tie, same files, now with my notes scribbled in his practiced hand. My lawyer whispered something in his ear. He nodded, murmured back. Her expression didn't change. She believed it was me. They all did. On the third day I watched the first witness take the stand, Emily's best friend. Her voice cracked when she said my name. I told her not to go back to him, she said. She said he'd changed. But I didn't believe it. She called me the night before. She was scared. That call had haunted me. Emily hadn't said she was scared of me, just scared. I never found out of what. But now, in that courtroom, her fear was a weapon, and Elliot bore the brunt of it, stoic and silent. I began to hate myself, not because I was guilty, but because I wasn't sure anymore if I deserved to be innocent. And then came the fourth day. That morning, something changed. I noticed it first, in the hallway, a juror walking slower than usual, lingering outside the courtroom doors. He glanced at Elliot, frowned faintly, then walked on. Inside, I watched on the monitor as he stole quick glances at my brother during the opening minutes, scribbled something, looked again. Panic crept into my lungs. He knows. He can tell. But what could he say? "Excuse me, Your Honor, I think that man is someone else?" Without proof, it would sound like paranoia. I told myself it was nothing. Jurors. Watch everyone. That's their job. But then came the break. During the recess, the bailiff walked over to the judge's bench, whispered something. The judge's brow furrowed. He looked out across the room. I saw Elliot sit straighter. They were going to call me in. I ran. Out the back, through the tech hallway, past the archives, and down the stairwell. I didn't stop until I reached the side door near the garage. I breathed there, bent over, shaking. What the hell was I doing? I was the one on trial. Elliot was just supposed to sit in, to be the mask while I found a way to fix the truth. But now they were noticing. Now the mask had cracks. I made the decision then. I had to end it. That night, I went to Elliot's apartment. I expected him to be furious. Instead, he sat calmly on the couch, unwinding his tie like it was just another workday. "They're on to us," I said, closing the door behind me. "I know." I blinked. "Then why did you go back in today?" He looked at me, expression unreadable. "Because I'm the only one who still thinks you didn't do it." Silence fell between us. He stood, walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water. "I believed you, James, even when the evidence looked bad, even when you stopped calling Mom. But you didn't fight for yourself, you just ran." He set the glass in front of me. "I'm not doing this for you anymore. I'm doing it for her." And that's when I realized I hadn't told him everything. There was a reason Emily was scared. And I hadn't told anyone. The secret she made me promise to keep, the one that had nothing to do with me, but everything to do with what happened next. And it was about to come out, whether I was in the courtroom or not. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling in Elliot's spare bedroom, watching shadows stretch and pull like accusations in the dark. I kept hearing his voice. "I'm doing it for her. Emily, her name used to be. A place I ran to. Now it was a wound I couldn't close. It wasn't love. Not anymore. Love had left the building a long time before she did. But guilt, that stayed. That buried itself under my ribs and waited. The sun came up too fast. When I walked into the kitchen, Elliot was already dressed. Same suit, different tie. His hands moved methodically, folding notes, checking the trial schedule on his phone, like a man who knew his part by heart. "We can't keep doing this," I said, barely above a whisper. He didn't look at me. "No, we can't." He slid a folder into his bag. "I'm ending it today." I stiffened. "What does that mean?" He finally met my eyes. "It means the jury's going to see the truth. All of it." I stared at him. I wanted to ask what he thought the truth was, but I didn't. Because deep down, I was afraid his version might be clearer than mine. He left without another word. The door clicked behind him like a closing verdict. I arrived late to the courthouse. No back room today. No grainy monitors. I walked through the front door like a man walking toward his own reflection. The guards didn't blink. No one stopped me. No one knew there were two of us. I sat in the gallery, cap pulled low, hoodie zipped to my throat, close enough to see the back of Elliot's head, close enough to hear the tension in the prosecutor's voice when she said, "Today, we'll hear from the last person to speak with Emily Winslow before her disappearance." My lungs froze. I hadn't expected this. It was her roommate, Jess, the one who'd cried on the stand 2 days ago. But now, her eyes were dry, her shoulders squared. The prosecutor approached. "Jess, can you tell the court about the voicemail you found?" Elliot didn't move. Jess swallowed. "It was, left the night Emily disappeared. I didn't hear it until a few days later. I'd been out of town. When I got back, her phone was still on the table. Dead battery." She hesitated. "It took me a while to charge it. When I did, there was a message." The prosecutor nodded. "And what did Emily say in that message?" Jess looked down at her hands. "She said she was going to tell James everything." I felt the oxygen suck out of the room. My body went numb. Jess continued. "She said she couldn't keep the secret anymore, that it wasn't fair to anyone. She said she was scared, but not of him." Elliot didn't blink. "She said, 'I love him, but I won't lie for him.'" The prosecutor let it hang. "Jess, did Emily say who him was?" A pause. "No, just, he knows what he did." Elliot shifted slightly. "Just enough for me to notice." The judge leaned in. "Is this voicemail available for the court?" Jess nodded. "I gave it to the police, but they said it wasn't admissible." The prosecutor looked irritated but forced a smile. "Thank you, Jess. No further questions." The defense attorney rose. "My attorney. Still thinking Elliot was me. Jess, you say Emily was scared, but she never once mentioned my client by name?" "No." "And she never said what the secret was?" "No." "Then how can you be certain this had anything to do with him?" Jess looked at the attorney. Then at Elliot. Her voice dropped. "Because the week before she told me she thought someone was following her. And she didn't mean James." Whispers filled the room. The judge struck his gavel once. Silence in the gallery. I couldn't move. My hands were locked on the bench in front of me, white-knuckled and shaking. Jess stepped down, and then something happened. Elliot turned, just slightly, but enough that I could see the edge of his face, enough that the juror who'd been watching him all week suddenly narrowed his eyes. It wasn't much. A glance. A moment. But it broke the spell. He sees it. That juror, mid-40s, balding, eyes sharp, leaned to the bailiff, whispered something. The bailiff nodded, stiffly, walked toward the judge. A note was passed. The judge frowned, looked toward the defense, then at Elliot. "Mr. Carter," he said slowly, "please approach the bench." Elliot rose, calm, controlled. But I saw it, the tremor in his hand. He walked to the bench. My attorney followed. The prosecutor joined. They whispered. The judge's eyes darted between them. I couldn't hear the words, but then the judge's voice filled the room. "This court will take a short recess." The gavel cracked once more, and the room exhaled. I bolted from my seat, down the hallway, past the marble pillars and vending machines and stunned silence of a dozen reporters. I reached the back exit before I heard the footsteps behind me. "James! Elliot!" I stopped, turned. His tie was undone now, sweat on his brow. For once, his face looked like mine, tired, frantic. "What did you tell them?" I asked, breathless. "Nothing," he said. "Yet." "Why?" He stepped closer. "Because I want you to do it. I want you to walk in there and tell them who you are. Tell them the truth." My heart thudded against my ribs. "You think that will fix it?" "No," he said quietly. "But it will stop you from disappearing." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the voice recorder. I stared at it. "That the message?" He nodded. "I made a copy. They won't let it in as evidence, but if you play it now, in court, it'll be real. It'll be public." I stared at the tiny device in his palm, the weight of it, Emily's voice. One last time. I took it. "Why are you doing this?" Elliot looked away. "Because I lied, too." The words hit like gravel against glass. "What?" He looked me in the eyes. "That night I saw her. My skin turned to ice. She came to my apartment first. She was upset, said she was going to confront you. I tried to stop her. I should have stopped her. But I let her go." My mouth was dry. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I knew what it would sound like." He stepped back. "I didn't kill her, James. And I believe you didn't either. But we both failed her." The hallway was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of echoing footsteps. I looked down at the recorder. "You want me to go in there and play this?" He nodded. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, not justice, just the truth. I walked back in. The courtroom was half empty during recess, but the judge was still at his bench, flipping through papers. The bailiff moved to block me, but Elliot stepped forward. "It's him," he said. "That's James Carter." Everything stopped. The judge looked up. I stepped into the aisle. "I'd like to address the court," I said. Gasps. The prosecutor stood. The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Carter, please explain yourself." I nodded. "I will. But first, this." I held up the recorder. "This is the last thing Emily Winslow ever said." I pressed play. Her voice filled the courtroom, cracked, scared, honest. "I can't keep this secret anymore. He knows what he did. If anything happens to me, tell them I tried to stop it. I love him, but I won't lie for him. Not anymore." The silence that followed was unbearable. I looked at the judge. "I didn't kill her," I said. "But I let her walk away that night. I let her walk into something neither of us saw coming." The prosecutor moved toward her desk. The judge's face was unreadable. The bailiff stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me." I nodded. As I turned, I saw Elliot watching me. He looked lighter. Sad, but lighter. And in that moment, I understood. He hadn't taken my seat to protect me. He'd taken it to make me show up. I'd always believed the worst part of prison would be the noise, the clang of steel doors, the shouting, the fluorescent buzz that never stops. But I was wrong. It's the silence, the kind that fills your head when the world moves on without you, when your name's on the news for all the wrong reasons, when your mother looks at you like she doesn't know which twin you are anymore. It's the silence when you try to sleep, the silence of wondering if anyone still believes you, and worst of all, the silence where her voice used to be, the voice on that recorder. They didn't let me keep it, not officially. But someone, a clerk, a bailiff, maybe even the judge, slipped me a copy on a plain flash drive the day they took me in. No note, just the voice. Her voice. I played it every night for the first week, over and over, until it wasn't a confession anymore. It was a ghost, reminding me of everything I didn't say, everything I let happen. It wasn't a guilty plea, not in the legal sense. The court ruled it as evidence tampering. Mistrial. They declared the proceedings compromised. Elliot was never charged. He hadn't committed a crime, technically. They never found enough evidence to convict me either, but they held me anyway. Obstruction, perjury, fraud. I was in a courtroom seat I should have claimed from the beginning, and I stayed there for 18 months before they finally let me out. Time served, record stained, family shattered. But by then, something else had shifted. They reopened Emily's case, not because of me, but because of what came next. The first letter came in a plain envelope, 3 weeks after I was released. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of a journal page, faint handwriting, faded edges, but I knew it was hers. If he ever finds out, he'll lose everything, and I'll be blamed for it. But I can't keep lying. I need to tell James, or Elliot, someone. I read it 10 times before I realized what it meant. It wasn't about me, it was about someone else. I called Elliot. He didn't pick up the first time, or the second. Finally, on the third try, I heard his voice. Flat. Tired. "What do you want, James?" I got a letter. Silence. It's her handwriting. More silence. "Elliot," I said slowly. "What did she know?" A pause. Then he said, "Come over." His apartment hadn't changed. The same couch. The same stack of unopened mail on the kitchen table. But he looked different. Older. Grayer at the temples, like the trial had added 10 years to his face. He didn't say hello, just handed me a folder. Inside were more journal pages. Emily's. Dozens of them. Some barely legible, others sharp and clear. Dated. Organized. "She gave them to me," he said. "Months before she disappeared." I looked up. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because I promised her I wouldn't." My hands trembled. "She was protecting someone," he said. "Not you, not me." I flipped through the pages, then stopped. There was a name, and it wasn't either of ours. He was a professor, mid-40s, charismatic, respected in the psychology department where Emily had taken night classes. She'd written about him obsessively at first, inspired, flattered, then confused, then afraid. She never accused him directly, but the language changed. "He's watching me. He said no one would believe me. I think he followed me to the bookstore, and then he said if I told anyone he'd ruin me." The pieces clicked like a lock sliding shut. She hadn't come to confront me that night. She'd come to warn me, and when I shut the door on her, when I told her, "I can't do this anymore," I left her alone. She went to him next, and she never came back. I took the folder to the police. This time they listened. They questioned the professor. Quietly, at first, but then more aggressively. Search warrants, subpoenas, the works. They found a hidden hard drive, encrypted but cracked within a week. Inside were surveillance photos, notes, recordings. Dozens of women. Some names matched the journal. One of them was Emily Winslow. The headlines came fast. Local professor arrested in missing woman cold. Case. Digital evidence reveals pattern of harassment and threats. But the one that stuck with me was this. Wrong man on trial, twin brothers cleared as new suspect emerges. We were cleared, publicly but not cleanly, because the truth doesn't erase the damage. It just stops it from getting worse. Elliot and I didn't speak much after that. Some wounds don't close with time. Only distance. He moved out of state. New job. New life. Sometimes I get a postcard. No words, just a photo. Mountains. Lakes. A dog once. Maybe he's happy. I hope he is. I stayed. Got a job at a nonprofit. Prison reform, ironically. The same people who used to treat me like a headline now wanted me to speak on panels. How the system fails the innocent. I didn't feel innocent, but I felt responsible. So I said yes. Some nights I walk by the bookstore where Emily and I used to meet. It's a cafe now, brighter, louder, but I still see her there sometimes, in the reflection of a window or the silhouette of a girl with a similar laugh. My mind playing tricks. Or maybe her memory refusing to fade. I carry her journal now. The original pages, not the copies. They smell like old paper and courage, and I read one entry every night before bed, like a prayer I don't deserve. One morning, I woke to a knock at my door. A woman stood there, late 20s, familiar eyes, nervous smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "This might sound strange, but I think you knew my mother." My breath caught. Emily Winslow. She held out a folded letter. "She wrote this before I was born. Said I should find you someday. My hand shook as I opened it. Just 3 lines. If he ever finds this, tell him I forgave him, even before he asked. I couldn't breathe. She looked at me, eyes full of questions. I stepped aside. Come in, I said. People still ask me what it felt like. To have someone take my place in court. To sit in my name, wear my guilt, play my part. I tell them the truth. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like grace. The kind you never see coming. The kind you only understand years later. When the silence finally breaks, and someone knocks on your door,